Hello, I'm Robin. This is my policy brief presentation on the Minnesota READ Act. K through 12 Minnesota reading skill attainment rates and the gaps in those rates by socioeconomic and ethnicity demographics have been concerning for a long time, and they've only become more troublesome since the online years of COVID. The state of Minnesota created the READ Act to address these low reading rates. Because the primary years are formative, there is special focus on reading in K through 4. The main goal? Minnesota students will be able to read at or above grade level every year starting in kindergarten. Areas addressed include screening, curricula, interventions, teacher training, and tracking. Students in K through 3 will be screened 3 times per year to get a baseline, and then they'll continually monitor progress. Multilingual students should be tested in both English and in their home language. Students who do not make the grade level reading goal by 4th grade will be assessed for dyslexia. By 2025 through 27, districts are required to use evidence-based curriculum that teaches foundational reading skills, PA phonics fluency, oral language, vocabulary, and comprehension. Curricula that are highly aligned to evidence-based practices are eligible for Minnesota READ Act funds. Students who do not make their grade level reading goal in K through 3 will be given interventions. Reading goals will be incorporated into the IEPs of special education students. Schools are encouraged to create personal learning plans in collaboration with family for students who need interventions. These interventions include intensified instruction during school or summer school or extended day programs. Districts must train teachers on these evidence-based practices, with the first phase implemented by July of 26. Districts must also train teachers on the use of culturally responsive pedagogy. Districts are urged to use an MTSS framework for monitoring progress, their program's fidelity, and for analyzing student needs and outcomes. Districts must publicly post their literacy plans by June 15th of each year, including their chosen curriculum, proficiency data summaries, staff training summaries, intervention strategies, and family involvement strategies. The question, does the Minnesota READ Act align with current reading teaching best practices? I answer this question yes, by and large, and here are a couple of the reasons. The Minnesota READ Act does focus on the use of evidence-based practices in each area of its direction, its guidance, and its financial support. And because the objectives outlined and supported by the READ Act are consistent with the recommendations of the 2000 National Reading Panel meta-study that found those important 5 pillars of learning to read. And as you remember, these 5 pillars are part of the Minnesota READ Act: PA phonics fluency, oral language, vocab, and comprehension. Is the Minnesota READ Act supported by respected theories of learning to read? Again, I said by and large, yes. The Minnesota Act, for example, is supported by the theory of the simple view of reading, and it addresses skills needed for both word recognition and language comprehension, as well as intervention in either area or both. Likewise, the reading model of Scarborough's reading rope also appears to serve as a foundation for the READ Act. Like the reading rope, the many objectives of the READ Act acknowledge that there are many parts included in each of the two main parts of reading of the simple view. The READ Act addresses these many different skills needed for strong reading with screening, intervention, monitoring. These things are essential to ensure that all strands become strong so that the rope holds. The Act also insists on prioritizing the theory of culturally responsive pedagogy, a theory that insists on the inclusion of relevant literature and relevant teaching strategies for populations that have been historically oppressed, so that learning is culturally relevant and relatable for students of all backgrounds and ethnicities. And the idea of CRP is that it bridges learning through connections to personal and cultural strengths, especially of BIPOC students. So, as for implementation, here are some of my personal thoughts. Reading, of course, is complex and it's an often difficult skill requiring a great amount of time and practice. I believe the secret of good teaching is in helping each student find their motivation for that practice, for the hard stuff, and for the teacher to know them well enough to be able to help them find the joy in learning through the best strategies. Strategies often structured socially and consistently facilitated through a trusted student-teacher bond. Striving for these things is the tireless work of a teacher's love and passion for each of their students and for their mission, and these things cannot be legislated. I do, however, give Minnesota credit for doing their best to guide teachers towards strategies of research best practices. For example, the inclusion of screenings, interventions, CRP training, and the recommendation for the use of the MTSS model may bring our state closer toward the equity of opportunity we dream of for all of Minnesota's children and youth. And also, on a personal note, I had a certain identity shift during this project. I now view myself as more big picture and more knowledgeable about the details of the Minnesota READ Act, and I have a wider lens on the Minnesota MTSS. As a teacher, I did not have a full picture of either of these documents, even though the READ Act was frequently referred to at our reading team meetings, and I was active during the team meetings with the MTSS referrals. But now I feel enriched by the bigger pictures of these policies. While I've been all in for equity, responsiveness, and evidence-based instruction for years, I now have a bigger view of how policy might contribute toward these aims. Thank you for listening.